Beverly Palmer, welcome to Shrink Wrap Radio.
Thank you.
Well, it's really good to have you here, and I want to congratulate you on your book, Love Demystified Strategies for a Successful Love Life. And so I'm sure that's to write a big book, I think is just so impressive. And you've done it.
It was a lot of work, yes.
Yeah. Over how many years?
Well, interesting you asked that. I've been a professor forever, more than 35 years.
Okay.
And in 1975, William Proxmire, senator, he was on a committee for funding the National Science Foundation.
Okay.
And he gave the Golden Fleece Award to a group of researchers that applied for money for researching love and interpersonal attraction. He said, everybody knows what love is. It's either there or it isn't there. We don't need to study it. Well, that got to me.
Uh-huh.
So I started looking at all the literature that we had up until then, and actually started writing a book called Love Life.
Way
And
back in 75.
yes, I was trying to take what had already been our scientific studies, our knowledge about it, and put it into a very user-friendly format. Well, I wrote most of the manuscript. It went to an agent in New York, and that agent died suddenly
Oh,
soon afterward.
oh
And
no.
I was so really grief-stricken and taken aback. I just put the manuscript away. And now it was probably about 1985 already, and never touched it. Then one day, about 5 years ago, my husband said, "We have got to clean up this garage. All this stuff in here, all your papers, everything. Our son's going to come in after we are gone, and he's just going to throw it all away. So let's start now."
Yeah.
Well, you can imagine what happened. I came across the old manuscript, and I said, well, I've been reading all the literature all these years, and there's so much more that's out there. So why don't I try to rewrite it? Well, I had to write it from scratch again,
Oh,
but it was really a journey and actually kind of fun to write because there's so much that's available to us to help us have a happier love life.
well, great. I'm sure our listeners and viewers are going to be very interested in that. Before we get into talking about the book specifically, I do want to explore your life a little bit. You know, I'm a clinical psychologist. We like to get down to the nitty gritty. Um, so, one of the things I'm wondering is what drew you to psychology in the first place?
Actually, I wanted to be a philosophy major in college, but in my freshman year, I had a terrific psychology professor
Oh,
for
that's not happening.
introduction to
Yeah,
psychology. Exactly. As
yeah.
you and I know, being a professor, you can really influence people to be curious and lifelong learners in your subject.
Yes, yes. And I was a philosophy minor, and
Oh,
and my intro to psych experience was terrible. I thought about maybe going into psychology, but later, when I learned that there was such a thing as a clinical psychologist, then that's when I turned around and said, "Oh, I've got to figure out how to become one of those."
ah.
Yeah. So, and then what drew you to, well, I guess your story maybe answers this question of how you got interested in couples counseling specifically.
Yes, it really was because I found so much in the literature that I thought would be helpful for couples. And this comes from both clinical psychology and social psychology, which was my cognate or minor.
Oh, yeah.
And so I really felt like I wanted to share some of this face to face as well as in the book.
Yes, right. And I guess I noticed that you are listed by the American Psychological Association as an expert in, is that right? Before I
Yeah.
go any further?
Yes. Yes,
And
I
in,
just gave an interview about 2 weeks ago to the New York Times that the American Psychological Association had given them my name.
wow, congratulations. I I didn't know that the American Psychological Association was giving some kind of imprimatur on specializations. Is that something new? Imprimatur,
Premature.
I think it's pronounced imprimatur.
Oh, yeah, there's a whole media division, and then also the main APA
Ah,
really is something that the journalists can tap into, and
okay, right. This is,
journalists are grateful for anything that really is substantive, that's
yeah,
not just opinion.
yeah, right. I understand now. Right. It's a way for journalists who want to get into psychological topics and find good experts to interview. So
Yeah.
congratulations on that recognition. And so, how did you and your husband meet?
Ah, more than 52 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Actually, we've been married for 52 years, so it's been a
Congratulations.
long
Yeah.
time. Well, we were both at the University of Michigan. I had just transferred there
As
and
undergraduates?
as
Okay, I
undergraduates.
have to throw in here that I got my PhD at the University of Michigan, but go
Oh,
ahead. So we
well,
have
we
Ann
have a
Arbor
lot
in
of,
common.
yes, to talk about with that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was wandering on the campus with a giant map, and my husband to be he strolled out of the beta house and said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Oh, yes." I said, "I'm trying to find rat lab." I said, "It's 6 weeks into the semester and I haven't found rat lab, and my rat has to be affection trained."
Oh, a
And
rat.
he
Yeah.
said, "Well, I happen to be have taking rat lab also." The lecture halls were very big, and then you went to the lab separately.
Yeah.
And so he took me, and then he waited outside for me for several hours
Oh,
for me to
really?
come back out.
He must have
And
liked what he saw.
oh, that's very nice. It was a very good connection right from the start.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's wonderful. And rats were sort of big part of our apprenticeship for many
Yes.
psychologists in those days. Yeah. You don't do rats anymore, do you?
No, and I hope what I learned from rats, I don't apply to humans.
Very good, very good. Um, so, so you meet this magical guy who's very interested in you. And I know you in your book you say that you've had a very happy marriage, but I wonder, were there any tough places in your marriage over the years that you and your husband had to
Yes,
work
I think
through?
there are, yeah, for all of us. We always had, well, one of the toughest was we were the Vietnam War people. We go back a long time.
Yeah, me too.
So my husband got a deferral to finish his psychiatric residency before he went into doing his military service. And we were fortunate that he was stationed in the Long Beach Naval Hospital, but as an emergency room physician.
Wow.
Yes. And we had just had our son. Our son was almost 2 months premature.
Mm.
I was in my first year as a tenure track professor, so I was alone with a very special needs baby
Uh-huh.
and having to teach. We didn't have family leave in those days. I didn't even accrue enough sick leave. I had to go right back to work. So that was really tough
Yeah.
because I felt I was out there all alone. I
Right.
really didn't have a husband.
Yeah.
He couldn't. And he couldn't even keep connected with me when he was an ER doctor. So, yes, he came home at least once a week, but it was rough.
Yeah. Yeah. Challenging period.
And then I, I ran away.
How so?
um, I actually was fortunate later in our marriage, this was about 12 years ago, to have three different Fulbright fellowships.
Wow.
Yes, that's where our State Department and our federal government has a special division that it allows professors or people with certain expertise, they sort of on loan to anybody in academia or in government in other countries that might need that expertise. So my first one was for 5 months in Borneo, where I set up a psychology program.
Wow.
The second one was for another 5 months in mainland Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur. And my third one was, and that was 5 months. My third one was Barbados for 5 months.
Yeah. So what a
So he
colorful
was
life you were
alone.
leading. Yeah. And he was alone now.
Yeah. So I think what we really had going for us right from the get go was a lot of open communication and really expressing appreciation for
Yeah.
each other, to each other, almost every day. So
Oh,
even
that's
when we're
special.
apart, any way that we could keep in touch, we did and communicated very openly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. I was interested to see that you were influenced by Carl Rogers. And I got to have dinner with him once, but, and I've been very impressed with his work as time has gone by, to really appreciate his pioneering impact. But tell us about your experience with Carl Rogers and what impact that's maybe had on how you see the world and think about psychology.
Well, I actually encountered Carl Rogers' research when I was at University of Michigan as an undergrad. And then I went to Ohio State for my PhD. Yes, we have a lot of fun in football season,
Yeah,
uh,
right.
but we still root for Michigan. And we, the Department of Counseling Psychology there was very much into Carl Rogers and all of the humanistic psychologists. And so I did much more studying in his theory and research. Then in 1974, I was fortunate enough to be one of the 59 people that spent the whole summer with him at UC Santa Cruz,
Mhm.
trying to take his theory and research and apply it to building whole communities. He wrote about that afterward in his book On Personal Power.
Okay.
And then I did keep fairly close touch with him because he was right near me in La Jolla, near San Diego, and I'm Los Angeles area. So every once in a while, I'd go down and pick him up and bring him up here for a conference or something. So I felt very close to him as a person as well as to his research and theory.
Yeah.
And of course, we should talk about what that is, right?
Yes.
Okay. What he was able to show is that for all good, healthy, growthful relationships, there's several qualities that are needed. The first one is empathy. And the second one is unconditional positive regard or acceptance. And he actually demonstrated through research that this was important for couples to
Hmm.
have a growthful, happy relationship. It was important for therapists and clients. It was important for teachers and students. It was important for doctors and patients.
Yeah,
And he even took it to it's important if there's conflicts between nations.
yeah, yeah, he did.
Just those
Right.
qualities.
Yeah. And so would you describe your orientation in psychology as Rogerian or what? How would you think of it over the course of your career?
Well, yes, as you probably know, over the course of our career, we tend to evolve and add on a lot of
Yes,
things,
right.
mostly because our patients, our clients are really giving us information about what they really need, and sometimes what they're needing may not be in just one genre or one specialization.
Hmm.
So, my background is social psychology, as I mentioned, besides clinical psychology. And I would say I listen very deeply to the couple or to the individual that's in front of me, and if they're needing something from cognitive psychology, say that they are very anxious because they're always having very unhelpful thoughts that are fueling that anxiety,
Hmm.
such as what if kinds of thoughts.
Yeah.
And so I will use the cognitive therapy approach with them, or also the behavioral part, which is mindfulness. Uh, then also, many people, they really have life issues or relationship issues. And I find the humanistic approach is very helpful, not only to help them learn how that might help them, but also to demonstrate it in therapy.
Yeah. Yeah.
High level of empathy.
Uh-huh. And that's something that you spend time on in the book, and we may discuss it more as we continue to talk about your book more. Now, I understand that you're very interested in how scientific findings uh, can give couples tools to have a happier love life. And so it sounds like you've really kept up with the literature, and that you're very interested in having a scientific base for the way that you work.
Yes, quite frankly, what really motivated me, just as Proxmire's not giving money to study love in 75, when I returned to this mission of writing this book, what motivated me was getting very upset about people going to the internet and to social media to get their advice
Hmm.
about relationships,
Hmm.
because most of that advice is just people's opinions. It's not grounded in any scientific facts.
Okay. So as we continue to speak here, feel free to A, refer to any relevant science to bring us up to date, and also to any anecdotes or examples that you might have from your work to illustrate points. And over that period of time, about a 40-year span, I guess, of your professional work, have you seen changes in the field of couples work, in our understanding of it, or how to approach it?
Yes, I think that we do have what something that we've always had, which is uh, differences among the generations. And so I can sort of see that the younger couples are really needing something different than couples that would be more my age, or even those in between the younger and the older couples. What seems to be happening today is the younger couples are delaying marriage in the first place.
Hmm.
And then when they do marry, they're really, again, more used to communicating to the person they're married to by text,
Ah,
just as they were when they were dating. And this doesn't work out because that's not face to face communication. I mean, right now, look at us with the video.
yeah,
We're communicating a lot just through our body language, through our facial expressions, through our tone of voice. We don't get that in text, and there can be a lot of misunderstandings. So I find that part of what I have to do is work with the younger couples in terms of just some of these basic face to face skills that they never really developed. And in their relationship, their marriage suffers.
yeah.
And then I'm also finding that the younger generation tends to a lot of times live together, not get married, oftentimes because expenses are so high in the Los Angeles area with rent and everything else, and in San Francisco area.
Oh, yeah.
They're right. They will just be roommates with both their boyfriend and maybe another couple or just two other people.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, there's all different kinds of partnering today,
Yeah.
and one has to take that into account. Also, the divorce rate is higher among the younger generation. So we have this, not just the generation, anyone's younger than me, really.
Mhm.
Um, so we do have fewer things holding couples together.
Uh-huh.
There were a lot more social and religious kinds of norms and
Yes.
messages that tended to hold people together of the older generation, even if there was not much love in the marriage. Of course, that's not necessarily the best thing either,
Right.
but they would just use those norms to stay together rather than trying to bring more love into their relationship. And younger ones say, oh, well, I fell in love. So now I think I've fallen out of love. Goodbye.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, there is a difference, isn't there, between the early stages of what's called infatuation, which is a very heady experience,
Yes.
and say something about the transition from that, you know, to this other thing, which is a long-term commitment.
Well, yes, and here I get to use some of the research.
Good.
I won't quote all the names are in my book,
Yeah.
but one of the findings is that that really explosive, tingly, whole body, not just even head,
Yeah.
heart, everything,
Right.
experience when you first, quote, fall in love, or passionate love, that is, lasts a maximum of 2.5 years. That's what the
That,
research
the
shows.
research says that's the max, huh?
If you are in constant contact,
Yes. Okay.
right. And so people don't know this. And they go, oh, well, that high is gone. Maybe I should go on to somebody else to try to get that high.
So, is
Right?
this something that should be discussed before people get married? You know, might it
They,
be a useful conversation to
oh,
say,
so true.
okay,
Because
what we're excited about right now is only going to last 2.5 years. What are we going to do after that?
Oh, that is so important, because not knowing that this whole experience will change, not necessarily for the worse, it can even feel better, but knowing that would be enormously helpful, because what bothers people, therapists that work with couples so much, is that 2.5 years is just enough to have a child.
Hmm.
And then you go, oh, I'm not in love anymore.
But the child is kind of a bind, and now there's a new factor that's kind of binding the people together, right? Not
Yeah,
necessarily for
a
over
happy.
the,
Yeah.
yeah, they may or may not be happy with that. But
Yes,
I think in the normal
exactly.
course of events, they're excited to have a child. And
Yes, but if they knew that this emotional high that they first experienced with each other is going to recede, that doesn't mean it goes away. It's just not at the level that it initially was. And
yeah,
it's replaced by a real caring for each other, a real like friendship.
yeah,
And of course, that probably was there in the beginning, or maybe not, but they need to know that not having that emotional high doesn't mean, to the intensity it did, doesn't mean there's no longer love in that relationship.
hmm hmm uh, marriages have to bear the weight of the couple's expectations, which may be different. They may have very different expectations of what it's supposed to be, what it's going to be. And those have probably changed over time as well. Talk to us a little bit about expectations.
Uh, well, yes, they have changed over time. The expectation now is that when I'm with you, you are going to do for me what I'm unwilling to do for myself. How
Oh,
do you like that one? That's a heavy one,
yeah.
right?
You're going to fulfill me and make me. You're going to make me happy.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Instead
And
of
instead of, I have a lot of love within myself, I have a lot of happiness within myself to add to this relationship, just as you, partner, do.
uh
And this is what makes our relationship really work, not really depending on the other to do for us
uh
something that we're expecting that that person should do.
yeah, yeah. You were talking about the younger couples today, and it seems to me that in some ways they come to it with, well, I think partly because of women's lib, uh, the males are more are softer somehow. I'm of a different generation, but they're more, at least many are more attuned to the needs of their partner and really work at trying to make it equal.
Well, I tried in the book, and I also try in my daily life to be a little aware of that I live in somewhat of a bubble,
Mm, mm,
generationally, um, educationally, even geographically and racially. So I try to be respectful and knowledgeable about the extreme diversity that we
mhm.
have in our society. So there is not only the diversity of partnering, like we were talking, where people aren't necessarily even getting married. There's also the diversity by class and by all these cultural and social variables.
Yeah.
So when I look at the expectations, it I can't really have a broad brush very
Uh,
easily
okay.
of whether the couple is coming to the marriage with a little bit more social skills and knowledge, or whether they're even expecting to have out of marriage what maybe I would expect.
Are you able to say anything about the state of marriage in America today? You did mention that among younger people, divorce seemed to be going up. Um, are there any other generalizations that you can make about marriage today?
Well, I did mention that people are waiting longer. People are having more than one marriage oftentimes, and children are growing up with blended families. And I think that the expectations for marriage are that, well, they're diverse. And so there can be everything of, okay, in this marriage, what we want is we want children, we want to have a family. The focus of our marriage will be on our children and everything we need to do for them. And then, of course, what do I see? I see when the children are gone,
Yeah.
each of the partners lands in my office,
Uh,
not knowing how to handle life, even
yeah.
because so much was focused on the children.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So now I know that there are major problems that you sometimes have to deal with, and maybe we could go through some of them. For example, jealousy. Tell us about, I feel like, The Prophet, Khalil Gibran's book, The Prophet.
Oh.
Master, tell us about jealousy.
Yes, I'm trying to think. There was a cute little fairy tale written during the 1970s about this person, I think it was a fairy that came to the earth and tried to show people that there isn't just so much love to go around, that there's an unlimited supply of love. So jealousy is basically when you make the assumption that there's only so much love to go around.
Mhm.
And so if your partner is paying attention to someone else or showing care towards someone else, that means that your partner is taking some of that attention and care away from you. Well, we don't have to make that assumption. But it does tend to be a very common, natural human feeling to feel jealous,
Yeah, yeah. So,
because we want that person all to ourselves.
yeah, right. Uh, can you think of a case maybe of somebody that you worked with where jealousy was a huge thing in the marriage?
Yes. And then we're talking about really a pathological jealousy.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
See, the usual kind of jealousy is to feel it, to express it, or maybe not to express it, but somehow be able to let it go eventually. And to ask for reassurance from your partner. That's certainly acceptable. Pathological jealousy, which I sometimes see in my office, is where the person is so insecure that they can't even allow themselves to be at a party and have their partner even talk to anybody else. That's not okay. That's not healthy for either of them.
Yeah. So how would you work with that person?
Actually, that oftentimes requires individual therapy rather than couples
Mhm.
counseling.
Okay.
And so you can teach the couple or you can help the couple be able to communicate how they're feeling, but it's not going to help that one person's jealousy that's too extreme. Also, that type of jealousy can lead to domestic abuse.
Yes.
And where the person is starting to not allow the partner to have any money so that the partner is trapped,
Uh-huh.
or won't let the person go out with friends. Mhm.
Yeah. So what would you do in that individual therapy, working with the jealous person?
Yeah. I would try to help the person understand the insecurity that's beneath that and try to help that person develop more security, a more secure
Mhm.
sense of self. This is longer term therapy, though. I'm
Yes.
do that.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It probably goes back to early attachment issues and so on.
Oh, yes. And
Yeah.
I would say that that's probably attachment issues. I'm glad you brought that up. are probably at the base of the mismatched expectations I often see.
Hmm.
So there's people that have a secure attachment, meaning that they can be at times dependent, at times independent, at times interdependent with their partner. They can be going with the flow and be whatever's needed in the moment. But insecure attachments are ones where you have to have the partner be a certain way. You have to have the relationship be a certain way. This often does come from early parenting kinds of interactions, and it can be changed. But the two that are most mismatched is an anxious attachment. This is a person who always wants the other one around
Hmm.
and wants the partner to always be very emotionally close with them and available. And the partner that's mismatched might have an avoidant attachment. That's where
That's not
it
going to work.
doesn't, yeah, it's just the
Yeah,
opposite. It's
yeah,
like, please leave me alone.
yeah.
And I just want to be by myself. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to get emotionally close to you. It's fine that you're in the same room, but just stay over there and don't talk.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. What about infidelity? Is that, I mean, we know that through, if no other way, through the Me Too movement, uh, that there's a lot of infidelity out there. And is it possible for a couple to get past that? And if so, how?
Yes. Social media has really contributed to the accessibility, availability of other sexual relationships. And I even have seen people in my practice who have gone specifically on websites to find someone to have an affair with.
Sure.
And this is really an issue because there's an assumption of trust in long-term commitments in relationships. And if that trust is broken, that's really at the bottom line of what's important in a relationship. Trust, as Eric Erickson talked about, is our first developmental task. And if we have that broken with our partner, it's terrible hurt. So the couple, if they are committed to working on trying to build a new relationship together, they need to let go of the past. They need to let go of their disappointments. They need to let go of their guilt, hurt, all that. So that takes a lot. And I think couples counseling is very important then if the
Mhm.
couple is committed to really trying to establish a whole new foundation of their relationship. And this can occur. But it has to occur where one doesn't keep trying to punish the other one.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
sometimes the hurt partner will try to make the other partner text them every hour, letting them know where they are, or put a GPS tracker on them,
Oh,
or
wow. Yeah.
no, that's
Yeah.
not going to build the kind of relationship that we need
Right.
to build.
Yeah.
Trust doesn't develop that way.
You've got a whole chapter in your book on rekindling love in a relationship. And that's sort of related to what we're talking about, to kind of fire it up again.
Yes, exactly. Research that has been based on Carl Rogers' work, as well as many social psychologists and clinical psychologists after him, have continued to show that there really are just a few really baseline important skills or qualities that are important to have a happy, loving, lasting relationship. And so the first one that we started to talk about was empathy.
Yeah.
And empathy is basically opening your ears, your eyes, and your heart to your partner, to really listen to your partner, and then to tell your partner what you've heard. It's not enough to just say, okay, I heard it. You
Yeah.
have to really repeat back what you really heard about what the partner is saying, the partner's thoughts, and the partner's feelings. And what this does is it strengthens the bond. One of the things that's quite surprising is that empathy begets empathy. So it only takes one to start the empathic communication,
Uh-huh.
and hang in there and keep doing that. It really does bring the partner along.
We have such a deep need, I think all of us, to be seen, to be really seen and understood. And you see it in little kids. And I even remember myself as a little kid being in this place of, mommy, mommy, look at me, at the beach. Look at me, look at me. And it doesn't, it's so intense, of that,
Yes.
that need, that hunger to be seen and understood and loved and all of that.
That's the essence of love. It
Yeah.
really is. There is one other one, though, that I'd
And
like to
not only
mention.
be seen, but also to be prized.
Yes, and
Yeah.
that's the unconditional positive regard. That
Uh-huh.
was the second one that we mentioned a little earlier, or acceptance. Now, this doesn't mean accepting the partner's behavior. You might not like that behavior. You might even disagree with the partner's opinions. That's perfectly okay. But you would need to, first of all, acknowledge the partner's opinions, and second of all, prize the partner. No matter what you do or say, I still love you. No matter, well,
Yeah.
within reason, obviously,
Yeah.
we're not talking about violence, but
Yeah.
um, you're really prizing, you're appreciating, really showing the partner that always that person is a person who has strengths and weaknesses,
Uh-huh.
sure, but you love all of that because that's what makes your partner unique.
Well, that becomes a spiritual practice, I think, at that level. Would you agree?
Yes, you're
Yeah.
looking beyond the surface, and you're looking, well, beneath the surface and beyond even the present moment, into the totality of your partner and the totality of your interaction with your partner, your
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah.
And yes, I think if we really want to go wigging out there a little bit,
Uh-huh.
your relationships in general with nature, your
Yeah.
surroundings, with everybody else in your life.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. So we've got empathy. I know you mentioned several things in the book. There was empathy. You also urged genuineness, acceptance, and active caring. Maybe take us through those.
Okay, so we did talk a little of acceptance. Genuineness is important in relationships because it does help build trust. You need to say what you and mean what you say. Because if you're not very self disclosing, especially of your feelings in the moment, then you're not really building an open, trusting relationship. And there's ways to communicate your feelings, even the difficult ones, without blowing the partner away, you know? And it's inviting a dialogue of, well, this is where I'm at. Where are you at?
Mhm.
And so it's also meaning what you say. Too often, what we're seeing in social media is people are putting on false fronts. They're lying. They're just not being genuine. They're not meaning what they say. They're just doing whatever they think is expedient at the moment. And that's terrible for a relationship.
Yeah, I think we're in a culture that is not particularly supportive of marriage. What do you think?
Not supportive of really connecting at a deep level with another human being. Stay in your bubble, just look out for yourself. um, don't really prize another human being and communicate empathically and with active caring. That's warmth. That's showing responsibility towards the other person. It's showing that you appreciate. Sometimes I'll get a couple and they will start yelling at each other in my office. And I go, wait, whoa, we're going to slow this down. We will talk in a moment about how you can communicate in a more caring way and still get your point across. In fact, maybe get it across better. However, before we do that, I want you to think for a moment. What if you didn't have that person in your life tomorrow?
Mhm.
How would you respond to that person today? That's a wake-up call.
Yeah, yeah, that's something that we all have to say to ourselves every now and then.
Yeah, because we don't want to wait till it's a real wake-up call, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, so, are there any other bases that you'd like to make sure we touch on before we wind this down?
Well, I really hope that my book, of course,
Yeah.
can become more available to people. I would especially, I think sometimes what's really helpful about it is because I cover everything from how to find love through, which we really didn't talk very much about this time, and how love changes throughout your relationship, these qualities that make love last, how to rekindle love, how to even start over again after losing a loved one. So it's really important for all stages. It's not the kind of book you read from top beginning to end. It's really one that you find out, oh, here's where I am right now. This is
Uh-huh.
what I want to read. And
Yeah.
then maybe your partner doesn't want anything to do with that. Well, you could just leave that page, if you get
Yeah.
the paperback in the book open, maybe it just at a place where your partner tends to look. And maybe you can get the message across that way. I also would very much like it to be like a Christmas book or something for people to give to the younger people that they know,
Mm.
you know?
That's an interesting idea. Yeah, you can't necessarily, if you gave it to another couple or another adults, they might take it as they might take offense that you're.
That's right. I'm just fine the way I am.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But
But
if you give it to young people just starting out and say, here is the rocky road that
uh-huh.
you're going to be facing. Here are some of the bumps along the way, and here's how you prevent any real disasters and how you repair them if there are some.
I think that is a great suggestion and maybe a great place for us to wrap it up. Say
Okay.
Merry Christmas, and it's not very far away. So,
Well, it's been a delight talking with you
well, thank
and
you, Beverly.
us both exploring this very interesting topic together.
Yeah, yeah. So thanks so much for being my guest today on Shrink Rap Radio.